So I am stepping in for my colleague Amruta, who, coming back from vacation, just got swamped with different things back at office. I'm going to talk about the same topic. We both work very closely with each other. So I'm really going to take some of the discussion which happened today, and I really want to talk about how do you scale this entire deployment from the hands of a few really smart people and try to get to a broader number of critical thinkers within your organization. And the thesis I'm leading in with is, how do you get it to every person in your organization? How do you have every person in your organization really engage with data at every point of that micro decision they're making when they're doing their work? If I look at the history of data and history of insights, what happened was back in the 80s, right, we started off with these paper reports, which started converting into spreadsheets, and it got into more spreadsheets. And from there, the industry moved very fast in the 90s in order to come up with more like data management technologies and business intelligence technologies, which started becoming from these reports and spreadsheets to, hey, let's try to visualize this. Like you're trying to become more visual, and some of these predictive models started to emerge where, like, how can I forecast? I'm budgeting and planning, I'm talking to my supplier, how can I start forecasting? How do I start looking at, hey, where do I end up my number? But now what's happening is, with the amazing amount of advancement in technology and literally the proliferation of the data sources within an organization, there are too many insights. Every organization, people are drowning with data and they're drowning with insights. And the key question is, how do you get these insights to the right people? Right, you have insights coming from your sales teams, your marketing, your order management, your operations, right? Each one of these insights are coming in, and what, in an ideal fashion, if I'm a person sitting in my call center, or if I'm an account executive going in and engaging and having a conversation with a customer, I really need that information in one place where I can really have a smart conversation at that point of interaction, because if I have to go back and forth, those are like, I'm not productive. I'm not doing the right job for that customer. If a customer has to call into the call center to change his flight or go in and solve a service disruption through 10 calls, right? I've already literally made him dissatisfied. So how do you, and there's a big hole as part of that entire equation. But the challenge is, and we've spoken about it in this panel and earlier in the day, quality of this data, right? The first key question is, where should I focus on, right? If I have so many insights coming in, how do they relate into each other? And then suddenly the question becomes, oh, am I looking at the wrong data? Because if 10 people are giving me insight, which one is the right insight, right? Based on the data quality, based on different people touching it, they're putting their flavor of those insights into that data. So what is actually relevant to the information or the decision I'm trying to make right now? And more importantly, when you look at something, you can look at what has happened, why did it happen based on the amount of information available. But if you also start looking at, okay, based on this information, what is likely to happen? Can I really trust that prediction? I've been in this business for 20 years, right? As a sales rep, for example, or as a service rep, or I've been doing this for 30 years. Can I really trust this prediction? I know my customer really well. I know my business really well. So that prediction element, how do you establish trust and transparency on what the data is telling you to every user while taking that decision? And more importantly, today in the industry, what happens is there's so many amazing and innovative projects happening, research happening, but how does it really get it in hands of every business user in the organization? People who have to really take those micro decisions every moment in interacting with your customers, trying to make decisions on the next supplier they need to select, trying to make a lot of these key business decisions which actually help the operational or the bottom line. So the thesis I'm coming in with is, and this is where Salesforce's strategy is very aligned, is, first of all, how can you have actionable insight right at the point of decisioning when you're making those day in, day out interaction, or you're making in those micro decisions. The second key thing is, if these insights are not operationalized, you may still be getting this insight, and then you're going on email, or then you're opening 3 systems up, and then you're trying to make those decisions. How do you automate those decisions right into, like, how did these decisions automated to say, hey, if a certain set of scenario happen, let's just escalate it, right? Because we've seen these trends again and again because these always run into an escalation. How do you take that decision factor and really operationalize it on the system? And last but not the least, how do you make some of these insights more, first of all, in context, right? Because if I'm looking at a customer, I really want in-context insight about that customer or that business or that transaction. If I'm getting about all insights and I have to find that information, you've already lost me, right? How do you make it in context, but also make it more as an explanation on why a certain trend is happening and what can I do in order to make it more simple, right? Because if you're going to everybody in your organization, you want to make it simple. While there's a lot of deep insight in it, how do you make it simple? So for a digital transformation for every business, right, as customers think about more and more digital transformation, how can you have that system of record, system of engagement, and your analytics system all sitting in a single view to your users? Because that's where the engagement comes. That's where the decisions start to kind of become more effective and faster. So in this new age of AI, the 6 things I would want you to think through, right? Or this is where we're really investing very hard for these 6 pillars within an AI story. First of all, whenever you go in and you're building the digital experience for your customers, try to really not only say, hey, what has happened and why did it happen, really build that intelligence within your environment. Try to make those digital experiences intelligent. The second area is you can make it intelligent. I can give insight, but if they're not outcome focused, right? If I cannot take an action right there and then, so you really want to talk about improvements, recommendations, and explanation right in there. And I'm going to try to show this to you. I'll try to fast track 15 minutes so that I don't eat into your break. The third area is it has to be complete, right? It just does not say, hey, by the way, pre-predict you're going to, your case handle level is going to go up. Why is it going to go up, right? Try to give that entire insights on what happened, why did it happen, so that descriptive and diagnostic, but what is likely to happen, which is like, where's this trend headed if we kind of continue to, if we don't change any behavior, and what are the things I can control the outcome for? Make it actionable, right? Connect it into your business process to make it actionable. Give them the next best offer right there and then. And last but not least, of course, you want to get this in hands of more and more organizations, you need to make it simple, right? So this is an area we work a lot on in the intelligence space, just to make sure that, and I think I'll come to a demo around the simple. Last but not least, Mark Benioff, when he talks about anything we're doing as a product, how do you make it transparent and accountable? When you look at transparency and accountability, it is like transparency in what we're doing in the model. Why is this we're coming out to a certain outcome? It's also making sure that you're looking at protected fields in your data, gender and probably the race or ethnicity. Those may be protected fields. How do you account for those kind of things so that you're not building biased model? So we're investing a lot in that area as well. And last but not least, how do I build that trust in that prediction which is coming out? So what we're looking at is how do you come to all of those insights, but right in the application people engage in every day. When you're a sales guy, how can you get notified on what happened in your business? How do you go look at what is the history of my history with this customer on what is the business we've done so far, what has been my history and the win rate with these guys, what are the products these guys have? How do you get all those insights right into when I actually go look at that account record, or when I look at that quote, or when I look at any of those records, but more importantly, also look at where this trend is heading and really be able to allow for an action, right? I can schedule that meeting right there if I need to. I can pull in that executive because that's what has always helped me move it to the finish line. Same thing for service, right? How do you already know that by the time this case has gotten to me at the second level, this is already like, we've already lost the trust of the customer, and based on the predicted CSAT rate, how can you help drive that action, right? If I need to make the next offer to this customer, let's make it right now. If I need to offer a voucher, do you offer it to them right now, or is this too early to offer that? How do you help them make those decisions? But this is where they're working every day. But then you can have so many different experiences, right? The experience needs to be for your entire company as well. How do you look at the production life cycle, and how do you look at the profitability for a particular brand? How do you look at your entire sales projections, and what are the key initiatives? What we're transitioning into is make every person in your organization data-driven, right? But not let them go into many systems. Let them help them get these insights right where they're working, but also give them this exact. We've typically come top-down. Let's go build these analytics. Let's go build these insights for the decision makers in the organization, and then everybody else left behind. That does not change the model which you're working. How do you take everybody along? And of course, you'll get that executive view as well along the way. Or when I'm looking at the windmill, how's the energy generation, and where are those points of decision where I need to go and take an action and maybe call in the service agents right away. So before I jump in, I'm going to show you a few areas of how the product could look like. So like the kind of experience a lot of customers from Salesforce are kind of building today with these kind of analysis is that while I have my entire CRM and my information, how are some of those insights right in that context to where I start my day every day, kind of a thing. And if I go into and say an opportunity or an account, how when I'm looking at that opportunity, I get a full view on what has happened with this customer in the past, what are we doing with them right now, and where is that next level of business looking like? And there are customers who've gone in and deployed it to 30,000 people in their organization, looking at as a client manager when I'm walking in the customer, if I have that view, I'm just trying to make a more informed decision, right, for my next level of conversation with the customer. But also, when I say trust and transparency, how do you give recommendation to say, hey, when you're working on this deal, your predicted margin or this opportunity, your predicted margin seems to be low. And some of the reason it's giving to you is that, hey, typically when you offer a holiday season promotion, your margin is higher. If you also are, because this customer is based in New York, we've typically done better from a New York perspective. But because it's New York and field sales, that has typically in your historical data, that has also weighed heavily on the deals. And because they're not a premium reseller, so one of the conversations you can have is if you want to kind of drive up a higher margin, maybe you do a premium reseller because that may have helped increase quantity with these kind of similar deals in the past. So it's making recommendation right there and then, because this is where I can go make either I can have that reseller kind of a conversation, or somebody had already taken the expectation that, hey, by doing a holiday season promotion, I can go take an action and kind of engage with the analytics right there and then. And as you're taking some of those insights, you're like the predicted margin and other based on the model changes. I'm going to also get into how do you get to these kind of models. But once again, it's like for your entire organization as well, because you don't want to just look at, hey, what is this deal right now? Where are my leaderboard? How are other people in my organization? What is the customer CSAT and others? So you get all of that information right there and then. We're also trying to create this experience for, now, how do you get to some of the data for these kind of insights, right? So I can actually load a lot of the data, but for me, one of the conversations we were having just now was a lot around data quality and reliability and understanding that data. How do you build that transparency? So I can go over here and I can go over here. I can go create a recipe. I can say, hey, let me start looking at my opportunity data, and I really want to go start analyzing my data better. This is where you can quickly go look at, hey, what kind of data I have, right? Because it's giving you a quick information on what's out there with the profiling. And this is where, like, I think the statistical technologies have been now so common in most of these systems that you can get to these kind of insights very, very quickly. But from here, I can say, hey, let me pull in additional demographic information about that data. So I'm going to pull in my customer demographic data set, which I may have pulled in from another system. I can do the right joins and others. I can look up. It automatically detected that, hey, there may be a common thing around there. And I pull some of those additional insights in. And when I pull those in, I did not pull in any fields along with it. So I can go back, edit that. And I can say, hey, let's go and pull in education, citizenship, marital status, some of these additional columns about this customer. But when I'm going in and analyzing this data, like for example, if I go into education level, it's going in and saying, hey, for example, there's master's, high school, and there are 3 different ways to write high school, right? Data quality, how do you surface them? So over here, it's giving me right recommendation there based on just simple clustering to say, hey, maybe you can combine these and bucket these, because when you go for analysis, you may want to have a clean view of these kind of things. So you can apply some of these insights, like you can use some of these statistical algorithms to clean up your data quickly, and there's so many different technologies available today in order to start looking at this data at a individual transaction level, because then you can actually start improving the data in your systems in order to do some of these insights. But let me go in and start doing some analysis on top of this. So for example, if I have a employee attrition data, so I'm going to talk about how did we come up with some of these insights which we had in one of the systems over here. So I go in, I take this data, and I create a story. So I want to look at, hey, I want to study what are the trends which are driving up attrition, right? So I want to say, hey, and there's a business goal I'm optimizing, I'm minimizing or maximizing, and I can make this a little bit bigger. And then I say, hey, minimize the attrition, yes, and then I'm going to do attrition analysis. This is what I'm trying to take I'm trying to take the entire data set and let me use machine learning in order to say, okay, what's there in my data? There's a statistic piece which just goes in and looks at your data, but then it kind of starts projecting it out. Now, I can start looking at very detailed sense of, hey, what is the data? Do I want to bucket it differently? Do I want to bin this differently? Because this is where I'm kind of starting doing some of that heavy lifting in order to, because what we're trying to do is how do you make a business analyst, and this is all about scaling your analytics investment, right? How do you make a business analyst who has really deep insights about your data mesh with technology? Because if you have combined the two, you can actually go in and circumvent a lot of the processes in between in order to start analyzing this data. So I can start looking at age. I may want to bucket it differently. Maybe age is one of my protected fields, right? When we think about trust in AI, do you come up with models which discriminate one gender or one age or people with a certain ethnicity? I may say, hey, this is my protected field. I want to make sure that as we come up with a model, the machine knows that these are areas I want to be careful around in my analysis. And I simply go in and start building my story. It did detect a couple of fields which were already aggregate. So it's flagging those already to say, hey, do you want to include these in your study or not? Because this seems like the data in them are already aggregate. So what a lot of tools are now evolving into is they statistically analyze your data, and they're trying to go in and simply say, hey, you may want to watch out for this, because we're already detecting data scenarios which you should be aware of, but you're now bringing your business knowledge along with your data knowledge in order to start thinking about how do you apply for it. While this is running, I already ran the story earlier. What we're trying to do is how do you take that data, and it ran every combination of that data set in order to say, so for example, hey, what is my attrition by region? What is my attrition by region by the tenure of a person? What is my attrition by region by, for example, gender? So it starts combining all of those different variables and starts analyzing it. And these could be billions of variations on. Now, if you start going in with the naked eye, you'll go in and start building bias. And then you'll say, OK, let me analyze these aspects of it. What you're doing is you're simply augmenting a machine to work with the business analyst to say, OK, let's go and start looking at all the combination and then say what's statistically significant. So it said that, hey, over time has the biggest weight on attrition in the kind of the training data you've provided. Or this could be the entire data, or this could be your training data. And now it's starting to give you here's some of the cases where attrition, yes, was better than average. So in case of no, year since last promotion was 0 to 1. So if the person got promoted last year and while he was doing overtime, that did, like the attrition, here some cases, yeah, so over there the attrition was low, like the overall attrition was low, because if you promoted somebody in the last year, even if they were doing overtime or they were traveling, that may not have been a big deal for them. So it's starting to give you those first and second level insights into your data, and there may be some obvious thing, yeah, I already know this about my data, right? there's no rocket science here. Okay, it may start kind of introducing different level of information, and I may say, hey, let me look at the combination of, for example, business travel with this insight. Okay, I'm going to look at again. I ran it for a while, so I'm going to refresh this story just to make sure. So I can go in and start looking at, say, look at maybe my travel, business travel really. Maybe there's no data in here. I'm looking at from a test environment. Oh, come on. I was demoing this from a pre-release org, so ignore my thing, employee attrition. So I can start narrowing it down. Just my demo gods are not with me right now, but then I can start getting into why it happened and what are the predictions, like where are the predictive and outcome heading. So this is since the pre-release environment, we were going through a release cycle today, so I ignored this. Okay. So similarly, one of the things we're also doing is how do you, based on the insights and the recommendation given, how do you get to that next best offer right there when your agent is looking at it? Because based on a certain set of scenarios, you can directly surface the next offers based on product set of offers, based on the algorithms you may be using or the models you may be deploying. Last, what I'll show you is this is kind of a view for a financial advisor. So while I'm looking at, hey, what are the tasks I need to do today? What are the leads? What are the things? I can start surfacing them more insight on what are the top metrics. If they're looking at growing their business, where do they need to go focus on? Or what are just simply the client set risks, which I need to go focus on just to make sure I'm managing them effectively? And in the operational application, as they're looking at leads, how to give you more insights right about those leads in context, just to make sure that they're kind of saying, hey, how am I doing? I'm on track in some of the metrics, but maybe I'm behind on some of the additional metrics around those leads when I look at it. Similarly, when they run these reports, what we're trying to say is how do you bring, every time I run a report in the system, how do you bring insights right there and then? So the analysis I was running with Einstein Discovery, you can run that analysis anywhere in a report, and I'm going to open an analysis I just ran before, just in respect of time. So I can go start looking at some of these insights directly in context when I'm running those reports in my CRM. Because what this is simply doing is bringing some of those statistical insights on top of the data I'm running and starting to surface the trends right in your data. But the key thesis is how do you trying to make sure every person in your organization has access to some of these insights. So, and there's so many different ways customers are using it today, whether just getting those insights on why things happen in my data, to getting those insights surfaced right in when you're looking at any record, right? Quote, sales, service, you can embed this in any other system. So there's so many different use cases on how customers are looking into you. So traditionally, the transition was a lot of time in the analytics or the data environment, you go and you seek out insights. How do you also ensure that the insights now start getting pushed to you? Because there are these two levels of engagement, and if you kind of embed those insights on where people are working right in context with that account or opportunity or deal, that is revolutionary. Generally, making it in context for all these insights so that those are micro moments of decisioning. And to look at those micro moments of decisioning, just don't look at getting those insights in there. Think about what is the data in order to provide those insights. What are the data points you need to provide at that particular point in time? How to convey the insights to the right person, right? Maybe there's some insights which are good for managers, but I don't really care when I'm looking at an account. I don't really need these insights right at that particular point in time. Think about the delivery, and more importantly, these insights need to activate some kind of a decision or action for you in your customers. Cool.
Awesome.